For most women, once they've seen Liquify, it becomes their new best friend. I call the Liquify tool the electronic liposuction tool, but it has a lot of different uses. Filters are technically known as plugins, and Liquify is a plugin or a basic portion of Photoshop that is immensely powerful. So under the Filter menu, you'll see Liquify. And once I run Liquify, there are 3 tools here that I typically use on beauty retouching, often on women, but for a lot of different things. Right now I'm on the Forward Warp tool, but what I want is the Pucker tool. And the Pucker tool sucks in fat. With the Pucker tool, I want to make this woman's waist a little bit thinner, because in this photograph she complained that her jacket made the waist look wider, and sometimes the fabric or clothing or just the angle can make people unhappy. So I want to make her happier with the photo because she loved the top portion of it, but still keep her looking like herself. So when I use the Pucker tool in the Liquify dialog, I'm going to dial the brush size up about as big as the area I'm trying to repair. So on this image, I find between 700 and 900 works well, a little over 900. And as I click, it just pulls towards the center, thereby skinnying her up. And I don't want everything moving towards the center. I have to make small clicks in different spots to really create more of a waist here, where the jacket is covering up the waist. Now, as I do this, you'll notice that it's pulling a bit of the bottom of the photo. So I think I'm happy with that waist. If I clicked OK, this bottom portion would just be white. So I will use the Forward Warp tool. And warp just basically pulls pixels in the direction you drag. So if I look at warp, again, I want it about as big as the area I'm fixing. So I will make the brush size, I'll simply dial it up, move my mouse over and check it out. Between 600 and 800 I think works well on this image. So I'll click and drag down, and it just moves everything down. And when I click OK, I can choose Edit, Undo, Edit, Redo. I've made it much better. I've given her a little bit more definition in the waist, and I've still kept her looking like her. So here's another example. Often when photographs are taken and you've got your arm on your waist or your arm at your side, a lot of people tend to press their arm against their body, and that may make the arm look twice as big. I try to remember to keep my arm away from the body, but today those Hollywood arms are enviable, and everybody is in pursuit of very thin or very muscular arms. So if you want to mimic more of that in a photograph, we can again use Filter, and be very careful not to choose Liquify at the top. Whenever you run a filter, it can repeat the last thing you did by choosing Filter and the name of the first thing under the menu, and you'll see the keyboard shortcut for that. But if I were to choose Liquify right here, it's hard to see what happened, but if I undo and redo, I had to scroll down to see it's repeating what I did in the last photo, and that's not what I want for this one. So I will undo that and make sure that I go to Filter and go below the Convert for Smart Filters down to the Liquify dialog. Now I'm ready. And for this shot, for the arm, I always use, on my Pucker tool, a brush size that's bigger than the area I'm trying to fix. So that's a little tight, so I'll go between 200 and 300. That will work. You also have to be careful with the Pucker tool not to click and drag, because it'll do some really, really weird, odd-looking things. So I'm going to undo that with Command-Z or Control-Z. I recommend you use it with a series of small clicks that you just work your way down the photograph with. And a lot of photographers use this on noses to see what the person might look like with a smaller nose. Just any body part or any part that might have picked up a bad angle because it was closer to the camera. And I have to make sure when I skinny up the top that the bottom gets a little reduction as well. And I usually have to take my whole head back and take a look at it from a distance to see if I've gone too far. Here, I've got a little ripple above the arm, so to repair that, I might go to a smaller brush size and just see if I could pull that ripple in. I look for the telltale signs of the ripples. Since I'm here, I might as well try a waist skinny up. So I'll make the brush a little bigger than the waist itself, and I don't just keep clicking on the center. I move left and right to pull everything towards that. It actually will add a little bit more black space here between the two. So I'm making a skinnier waist. And I think I'll let it go there. I've seen many people use this to give themselves a larger upper half or a larger bottom half. That's in fashion now. But you can use it on your thighs to make them skinnier. I could, just for fun, before I leave this, do a brush size that's very small, maybe 70, and I try to hit tab and not return or enter, but you could see what somebody would look like with a nose job, or if you thinned the top portion, if you're curious. So I'll choose Edit Step Backward until that nose is intact again, and each click has to be undone. There, so I saw it kick into the waist, so I can step forward. I'll click OK. I will fit in window, and I'll hit Command-Z on the Mac or Control-Z on Windows to see before and after. It's almost like you don't know how bad it is until you do the before and after. I'm sure it was fine originally. So the last thing I want to show is using Liquify to remove double chins. Again, people often have a habit of leaning their head back to try to fit in the camera lens or in the photograph when they should be leaning forward and maybe craning their neck out, which feels unnatural, and down so you don't get a double chin. People also tend to lean their head back when they're happy, when they smile, if you think of somebody jolly going, ha, 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 and their head goes back, which produces a double chin that they may not have normally. So again, to the Filter menu and Liquify, and I will use the Warp tool, the Forward Warp tool. And with that, I'm going to go small enough that it's not going to manipulate too much above the chin. And I'll zoom in with Command plus or Control plus and just start pushing up subtly and work my way all the way up the chin line, trying to keep the original lighting direction and angles. This earring will get a little bit out of whack, but I could fix that with the Bloat tool. The bloat will make things wider. Often at large magazines, they use the bloat tool to make people's eyes bigger, or they'll use the warp tool to elongate the neck. There's a whole series of videos on YouTube where they've done a beautiful model shoot, and then after that shown all the post work. So I do this as a nicety for my friends, just to try to make them feel a little bit better where I've captured a great shot, but they were just seeing the flaw in it. This way I can still have the great shot and remove the subtle flaw. So that looks a little fake here, but I'm going to show you how to fix it. And before I finish, I might move this earring over or out. It's always working from dead center, so I had to get the dead center on the earring. And as the last tip, I could try the bloat tool. You could try it on the middle of the eyes to make them bigger, especially if somebody has an eye that is maybe a little bit lazy, but it can get very fake very fast. So I'm going to step backward and remove that. But it will sometimes open a little bit of a slightly closed eye if it just looks out of proportion. I'm going to leave those alone and click OK. So before and after. And if anything looks out of whack, I'll zoom in and use my History Brush tool with 100% opacity to paint back some of the original chin line. that really helps everything look more realistic. In just a subtle amount. And now I can go to my history panel, click on the original, before, and after. And there's more work I can do, but my goal was to show you the two primary tools I use in Filter and Liquify, the Forward Warp tool and the Pucker tool, and illustrate what you could do with bloat. And I use it in a hopefully subtle way, but some really powerful moves on the image without a lot of work. So good luck with Liquify.